Hello everyone, this is going to be a quick tutorial on how to go from absolutely nothing to functioning controls using the qrwc-svelte library. Q-SYS Designer version 10 adds a feature called Q-SYS Remote WebSocket Control. This allows us to develop Q-SYS UIs using standard web tools. Q-SYS has provided their own NPM library, but some of the implementation is left up to the individual developer. To streamline things, M3 has created and open sourced the qrwc-svelte library that automates the setup process and exposes reactive controls through the use of Svelte 5 runes. In this tutorial, we'll walk through the Getting Started section of the README file, which will get you to your first functioning controls. Before we get started, you should know that the full documentation is available on GitHub pages. The link is in the README file. To get started, we're going to need Q-SYS Designer version 10 or later, and we'll need actual Q-SYS hardware as QRWC is not currently supported in emulation mode. And all controls must have script access set to all or external in Q-SYS Designer. Let's go ahead and check that out now. In our Q-SYS design, I've dropped in a single gain component, and under script access, we've set script access to all. We'll go ahead and save to the core and run. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and create our Svelte project. I'm going to copy the following commands from the README file. And inside the folder that I wish to create the project folder in, we'll go ahead and paste those commands. Here, we're going to use the standard Svelte project with Vite. SvelteKit adds extra complexity that we don't need. If you absolutely do need to use SvelteKit, see the README files section on SvelteKit as there are additional considerations. Here, we're going to name the project MyQSysUI, and Vite will automatically create a folder named MyQSysUI. Press Enter to start the process. Now, let's open this newly created folder in Visual Studio Code. Now, with VS Code open, let's go ahead and set up a couple things. First, we'll need to install the qrwc-svelte library. To do this, I'll just copy the npm install command found in the README file. This will also automatically install the Q-SYS QRWC package as a dependency. Now, we need to create a new instance of the qrwc-svelte library and connect to the core. We only really want to do this once, so we're going to create a file in the lib directory called qrwc.ts, and we'll paste the following code into it. So under source, lib, we'll create a new file called qrwc.ts. We'll go ahead and paste this in, and then change the IP address to match the IP address of our live core. Great! Now that that's done, we need to make sure that our core is connected before we try and display any controls. Q-SYS controls contain additional metadata that cannot be determined without an active core connection. Because of this, you do not want to render any controls unless you know that you're actively connected to the core. We can use an if block inside our root component in our Svelte project to ensure that we only render child components with active controls in them if we have an active connection. I'm going to go ahead and copy this code out here and overwrite the template code in our app.svelte component. Now we should be able to run our development server and see that we're connected to the core. We can do this by under npm scripts running the dev command or typing npm run dev. When we pull up localhost 5173 with our dev server, we see the word connected displayed. That means that we are actively connected to the core. You'll also see in our console that the qrwc-svelte library has printed a message saying that the connection's been established and we're ready to handle control subscriptions. Now we're ready to use our first control. To do this, we're going to create a component that has our controls in it. Inside the lib directory, I'm going to create a folder called components. And inside there, we're going to create a new file named gain.svelte. We can also delete the counter.svelte file that was created as part of the template project. Here, we need to do a couple things. First, we are going to add a script tag to make the language TypeScript. We then need to import the active QRWC instance that we created earlier. Great, now that we have our active QRWC instance, we need to subscribe to a component. It's worth mentioning the difference between components and controls. A component is a block that contains controls. To see the controls that a component contains, we can go to Tools and View Component Controls Info. Here we see that this gain component, which has the name of gain, contains controls for bypass, gain, invert, mute, and ramping controls. In this example, we're going to control both the gain and mute. As detailed in the README, we first need to subscribe to the component itself using the useComponent function. This gives us an active instance of the gain component to include all the component's metadata and any controls inside that component. Now, we need access to two of the controls that are stored within that gain component, the gain itself and the mute. The actual gain inside the gain control is going to be a type of knob. We use the useKnob method on that gain component to access the control. And in this case, the control is named gain. And then we'll also use the useButton method to gain access to the mute control. Now that we have access to both of these controls inside the script tag, we can tie them to HTML objects. We specify an input element. It's going to be of type range. We bind the gain control's value, which is the reactive value from the control, to the value of the input slider. And then we set the min and max of that input element based on the min and max of the gain control itself in Q-SYS. We then add our mute button, which is going to be a button element. The onClick action will invoke the toggle method of the mute control. We're going to change the color of the button by selectively adding the background colored red CSS style whenever the mute control's state is high. Because we're using Svelte 5 runes, all of this code is reactive and will update in real time whether set locally or remotely on the core. Now we need to import our gain component inside our app component. Now you can see that our controls work. In fact, if we pull up Q-SYS Designer next to our web UI, you'll see that the controls stay perfectly in sync no matter what side you control them from. Should you need additional assistance, it's strongly recommended that you check out the official documentation, which is linked in the NPM packages README. This includes examples for buttons, camera preview, knobs and faders, and text examples. If you're new to Svelte, it's also recommended that you check out the amazing Svelte tutorials found at svelte.dev and then click on Tutorial. This will walk you through the basics of how components work in Svelte and how runes work under the hood. And of course, be sure to check out the front-end web dev group on Q-SYS Communities, as I myself, among others, will be in there to provide assistance. Thanks for watching, and enjoy.